Hello and welcome to today's DeepSense Discovery Session. We are joined by Rick Power, and we are going to be talking about technology and learning to adapt, learning and adapting. There's a pile of different things we're going to cover off today. As a really quick background, DeepSense is a program based out of Dalhousie University with funding from the province of Nova Scotia, ACOA, which is the federal government, COVE, the Center for Ocean Ventures, the Ocean Frontier Institute, Dalhousie, and IBM. We support the ocean sector to better understand and use and adopt artificial intelligence and machine learning. And our projects usually include some great students from across Canada who work on help solving some of these challenges. And I'm joined by Rick today, and I've been fortunate to have known Rick for nearly 3 years, which is nothing compared to the amount of time that he has spent at IBM. With almost 36 years under his belt, and also that doesn't include any internships or co-op placements that some of you may be completing that Rick also completed. You're going to get a chance to hear about Rick's experience. And fortunately at DeepSense, I get a chance to chat with a lot of different students and a lot of different tech roles and different companies. And Rick has this really interesting balance of being able to speak about marketing, communications, business challenges, and then paired up with technology. And so I think this is a valuable experience for all of you to make sure you listen, ask questions, and engage, because Rick's advice is going to be fantastic, whether your career starts with a startup, a large company, whether it starts in tech or evolves to tech and comes back to tech. I think you're going to learn a lot. So I'm going to pass this over to Rick. One thing I do ask, though, is in the chats, we're going to throw down some pieces around DeepSense, including links to our LinkedIn page, A Data Ocean AI. We also have a data challenge coming up in the next few weeks where you can try to solve some of the climate change issues that we're seeing in coastal communities across the country and the world. And some of the other things that you might want to do with DeepSense in terms of mentorship, some training projects. We have lots there to help you engage with us. But as I pass it over, this is recorded. So any questions you have, we will definitely be making sure we ask them, but we don't have to give away who asked it. I ask that you put your questions in the Q&A section. Your chat is for the chat. We might miss your question. So if you have a question, throw it in Q&A and we will be sure that we ask Rick. So Rick, without further ado, thank you very much and take it away.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll make a few admissions first of all. I'm an odd beast. It's very unusual for anyone to be at the same employer for more than 35 years these days, probably a number much less than that. I will also admit to being a geek and a lifelong learner. I'm constantly trying to learn new things. They're not all related to my job, but many of them are. So, Jennifer, I'm going to start to share my screen now. You tell me if everyone sees it. How's that?
Looks fabulous.
Okay, perfect. So today, I'm largely going to speak to the things that were advertised. It talks about launching my career, talks about hot technologies, challenges, options, opportunities. I'm not necessarily going to speak to them in that order. I'm going to probably, most of the conversation is based around these 3 points. So I'm going to talk about soft skills being in demand and why, and largely because they can't be replaced by machines. I'm going to talk about what some people call luck, but I insist all the time that much of the luck I've had is because luck is at the intersection of being prepared and when an opportunity comes along. And I'm going to talk about learning and why it's essential. So I'm going to start by helping you understand my career and why I'm still here. I jokingly say, although there's some truth to it, that I'm still at IBM because they keep letting me chase the shiny new thing. So, but let me back up. So I went to university in Newfoundland at Memorial University. And when I started, I was going to be a mechanical engineer. That's what my father was. And I went to my first semester and did a computer science course and immediately changed my mind. So my first degree was in computer science. Now, over the course of those few years that it took to do the computer science degree, I also took a semester and went and did French immersion because that's something I just wanted to do. And I thought it was a great opportunity. And towards the end of my computer science degree, as much as I enjoyed programming for a few years and was pretty good at it, I decided that's not really what I wanted to spend the rest of my time doing. And so I decided to also do a commerce degree. One of the things that really attracted me to the degree was at Memorial, commerce was, and still is, although it's optional now, a co-op based program. So there is some luck that came in at this particular point. When it was time for my first work term, and that was very shortly after I started because I joined with advanced standing since I was so far ahead in computer science, a friend of mine told me I should apply for a job at IBM because that's where she was doing her work term. She was a year ahead of me. I didn't know anything about IBM at the time, but I applied for the job and I got the job. I've been here ever since. I did 3 work terms at IBM, 1 in Halifax and 2 in Newfoundland. And shortly after I started, after my first work term, essentially, they assured me they wanted to hire me full time. I even offered to start before I finished my commerce degree because by then I had all the courses I needed for my BSc, but one of my bosses insisted that that would be stupid and that I should finish my degree. So I was having fun and I decided instead of doing quantitative analysis or something closer to computer science, I'd do marketing because that intrigued me. And I've always liked to follow a lot of different things. So that is one exception to the comment I made earlier about luck. It truly was luck that I had a friend doing that and guided me in that direction. And that's how I got started. So I started at IBM in 1986 in St. John's, Newfoundland. And I've worked with, I'll start by saying I've worked with pretty much every new technology in the market since. And we'll talk about a number of those, but I started as a mainframe system specialist. Very few of you on the phone or on the call, sorry, probably have ever touched a mainframe, but it was reasonably common at the time. We programmed in COBOL, a language that I bet I'd be intrigued if anyone in the chat said that they had actually written programs in COBOL, but that was where we started. But I was supporting 3 large government-based, 2 government-based and a phone company in Newfoundland that had large mainframes. And I was doing a lot of networking solutions. There was a lot of communications devices attached to the mainframes for my first couple of years. And I did a bunch of work with personal computers. In fact, I was, for Newfoundland, the PC specialist for IBM. And I don't know how many of you know your history well of the personal computer, but in the 1980s, IBM was the big player in the PC market. We exited that market quite some years ago. I'm going to make for each of these 5-6 year spans, which is essentially how often I completely changed my career in IBM. I'm going to make some comments about key things that I learned. I had a boss who was very good at helping me understand how important it was to do career planning, and sat me down a couple of times and gave me some good materials to help me identify not only my strengths, but things that I really didn't like to do. So, and not just the job conditions, but all the things around that, like, what did I want to get from work? Not just what intrigued me, but what sort of work conditions did I want to have? Did I want to travel? Was I interested in moving at some point, and so on and so on? We'll come back to that. I'm going to talk about career planning a little further. But something happened in my first year at IBM, which really put me on the path I'm on. It may have happened later if it hadn't been this one person, but the vice president at Newfoundland Telephone at the time was a guy named Keith Hunt. And I've always been thankful to Keith for helping me out with this. Keith helped me understand when we would go to do presentations at the phone company. Keith was one of those rare people who would constantly interrupt with a question if he didn't understand what you were saying. He was not the least bit concerned about people thinking he should know things. If he didn't know, he would ask. And first of all, I thought that was, just the right thing to do. But he told me one day, because I would bring other IBM people with me from out of town and I would present myself, but he took me aside one day and he said, Rick, a lot of the people you bring here use all these terms that I don't understand. And I'm tired of asking them to explain it. So I want you to explain to them before they come to see me that if they can't explain things to me, and he was a finance guy who they'd moved in to take over IT as a way of rounding out his career. He said, if they can't explain it to me in language that I understand, I'm going to leave, because I don't have time to continue to ask so many questions. But what does that mean? What is that about? Tell people to come talk to me in a language that I understand. For me, that was a turning point. I don't know why it was so obvious, but that was a turning point. And the other thing that Keith told me, because I was nervous a lot my first year, these are people who'd been working with mainframes for a long time. I was new. He said, Rick, what you need to understand is we don't have time to learn all the new things, and we count on you to come in and speak to the new things. He said, so you don't need to go back and learn everything we already know. You need to focus on the future. Come to me and tell me how things are evolving in the IT industry and what's coming next and what we should be doing to prepare ourselves for the future. And that was another thing that really accelerated my career. And finally, there was one other thing he did. And this was at I actually requested it. He thought it was a great idea. I really needed to understand the industry in order to be able to explain things to him and to the people he worked with. I don't mean the IT guys, I mean the rest of the decision makers. I needed to understand their business. So he set me up for a week in 10 different parts of the company, and he sent me in to sit down with 10 different people in 10 different jobs at Newfoundland Telephone and shadow them for a day and see what they do. I actually went out on trucks doing installs in a home, doing repairs in a home. I sat at what they called the cable wheel. I won't bother to try to explain it now. I was in one of their stores when people were coming in to buy things. I saw the whole business. And I can't tell you how important that is if you're in a job where you're client facing, is to understand their business. So let me jump ahead now so we don't lose too much time. In 1991, I made one of the key decisions in my life and I decided to take a move to Halifax. The office in Newfoundland had 7 or 8 people in it. And it was clear if I wanted to stay with IBM, and I certainly did at the time, and if I wanted to get a promotion, if I wanted access to other interesting jobs, I was going to have to leave Newfoundland. So I did. I upped and moved to Halifax in 91. And I came here to take on what was the phone company here at the time, Maritime Tel, now part of Alliant for those who live here, to run their mainframe for them. A month after I got here, they outsourced their business to a company called System House and got rid of the mainframe, and I was left with no client. So I was kind of forced into changing roles at that time. As it happened, IBM was moving into the billable consulting business. It was not something IBM had prior to that. So I had an opportunity to be one of the first. And in the 5-year span that I had that job, I was involved in 3 amazing projects, all of which helped me a lot with my career. For the phone company, that same client, they wanted to move 25 people from, just like today, there was an incredible shortage of IT skilled people. They had what was a brilliant idea was to offer to people in the company to move into IT into a higher paying role. and they had a couple of hundred people apply for 25 spots. They asked us, and I ended up with the job, they asked us to build a retraining program. There were very few places. This was 1991, not nearly as many places where they could have done that at the time. But I designed the program. I hired all the people who were going to run it and teach it. I hired the project manager, and I supervised that program for 6 months while they moved their 25 people through. And it was an amazing success for them. Most of those people became managers in IT at the company over the succeeding years. With the same client, starting in 1992, I got involved in, you might not understand the acronym IVR, Interactive Voice Response. It's this kind of thing when you phone and a computer answers, it's the IVR. They were doing televoting. And this is 92, this is pre-internet. So you couldn't go vote on the internet. You could phone in and run votes via the phone. This was a massive project because they wanted to be able to handle 500 calls at a time. Again, I'm dating myself. That doesn't seem like a lot to most of you now, but that was unheard of back then. So we built a solution for them that was Unix-based and helped them set it up. We hired a company out of France as a subcontractor to build the application. And they actually ran a vote, a political vote, for the first time in Canada via telephone. It was done, we did that in 3 months, which was incredibly fast and a great success, but they didn't contract with the company in France to get the intellectual property. And once it had been successful, the company wanted a lot more money. So to jump quickly to where we went next, they decided to write it from scratch and hire another company to do it. And they hired me to supervise that. So I spent 1.5 to 2 years continually adding to that application. It was reasonably successful, but eventually the company decided to get out of that business. But the people who were there in that part of the business at the time left and are still here in town running a televoting company with a lot of the same code. Finally, in that job, I don't name it here, but it was Acadia University. In 1996, Acadia decided to become what was called the first Thinkpad, that was the IBM Thinkpad laptop university in Canada. They made it mandatory for every incoming student to receive, they were providing them to receive a laptop, and for professors to actually allow and encourage them to use it in the classroom, and for the profs to actually become computer literate and use them to teach. Again, 1996, unheard of. I lived on campus from April until October, worked 75 hours a week to get that up and running. It was a massive, massive project because we wired, there was no wireless. We wired every single room in all of the residences. We wired a lot of classrooms. We built a program to what you would call ghost the PCs. We established a help desk, which they'd never had previously. And for me, one of the most exciting things is I built a project. I took a sub-project to educate all of the professors in the Faculty of Arts, not computer science, not business, arts, to actually use computers in the classroom to teach their courses. Again, a great success. But the key life decision that I refer to on the chart came subsequent to that. A week after the project finished, I got married. And I had been approached by the IBM teams, because the program was so successful, to take a role with IBM to be a full-time billable consultant and take that on as a career that would see me traveling to our largest customers and doing massive projects. I decided I was not interested in being on the road traveling 5 days a week, 40 or 50 weeks a year, and I turned it down. But I didn't want to I was not, I didn't turn it down because I wanted to leave IBM. I turned it down because I did not want to be what you would call a road warrior at the time. So I moved into a different role. I moved over out of technical roles. I moved into a sales role, which IBM called client executive at the time. I had the telecoms in Atlantic Canada merged back then. All four of them became what is now Bell Alliant. They were my big account. I had 3 insurance companies in Atlantic Canada, and I had a company called Xwave, which if there might be someone on the call who's old enough to remember Xwave, but it was an IT services company based in Atlantic Canada. Again, fantastic experience. It was new to me. I enjoyed doing it. The money was good in sales. And I was doing well enough that IBM nominated me to go to Harvard for a month-long leadership training exercise, if you will, which was one of the turning points of my career. It was a fascinating bit of education, and I look back on it as one of the most important things I did in my life. In 2003, in January 2003, my daughter was born. And just before that, my wife and I sat down to try to figure out how we were going to adjust our lives to accommodate having kids now, because our son came along only a year later, and made another life decision. I decided I didn't want the sales job was a lot of work. I was putting 60, 70-hour weeks in a lot, because of course the money that I made was depending on how much I worked. Essentially, it wasn't a salary job, it was a commission job. And I decided I wanted to step back a bit and take it, be closer to home and not spend as much time at work and be able to help out with the kids when they were really young. So I moved into a technical job again. It was unheard of in IBM. I'm still the only person I've ever heard of in IBM who moved from a very successful sales career to a technical role. But I did. I've done a lot of weird things like that. So I had Sobeys there. I had mostly the first 2 years of that job, I had clients in Atlantic Canada only. Sobeys, all the same clients I had previously, except I was now their technical guy, and clients in New Brunswick and Newfoundland. I was doing a little bit of traveling, but not very much. After the kids got a little older and my wife went back to work, I decided it was time to step things up again and get back to the path that, the relatively quick career path I was on. And I asked to have an additional set of customers added to the territory. So the company asked me if I wanted to also handle Ottawa, private sector accounts in Ottawa and that part of Ontario. And so I said yes. So I moved in, taking care of some new industries. I had the big hospitals in Ottawa. And importantly to the story, I had the big software firms. None of them, well, some of you may recognize the name Cognos, if you know analytics at all. Corel is another firm you might recognize. There was a couple more, but it was interesting getting into the new industries. I was part of a team that was actually based in Montreal. So I would go to Montreal regularly. It gave me a chance to freshen up my French and speak in French a lot again. I'm not quite bilingual, but I'm pretty good in French. And I had, in my final year in that role, 2007, I had one massive project, and it was with Cognos, the company that I just referred to. It was a $25 million piece of business that they were offering for one of the consulting firms to come in and completely revamp a large number of their processes and systems. And so I was seconded from the software team over to the consulting team to do the technical piece of that. We won the deal. It was a 6-month, it took 6 months to get from start to finish on it, but we won the deal. And although I was one of the least technical people on the technical team in Canada that year, I was awarded the MVP award for the technical team in Canada. that was the good news. If I go to the next slide, here's what happened a month after we won the business. IBM bought Cognos. So we never did get the $25 million in revenue. I never did get to work on the project. This happened on, I remember the day well, it was a Monday. It says here it was a Monday. It was actually November 11th. It was a holiday when I was at home, and I found out that we had just bought my largest customer and the one where I was supposed to spend the next couple of years working on the project we won. Here's where preparation meets opportunity. I had a meeting in Toronto 2 days after that, already on the schedule, to meet with my second line manager and talk about where my career would be going now. And I walked into the room and put the article in front of him and said, I know what I want to do now. So I told him I wanted to be a part of the integration team and take care of the Cognos business for Canada. That type of job didn't exist in IBM at the time, but he said he would go away and he would start to have some conversations with folks and see if we couldn't come up with a plan that might accommodate such a bold maneuver. So we did. I moved in 2008. I became the integration leader for Canada for what became IBM's analytics business. And what you see here on the chart is 6 companies. Cognos was the first, 6 companies that we bought in 2007, 2008, and 2009 in the analytics business. And for 4 years, I ran a lot of that business for Canada and brought all the employees from these companies, importantly, into IBM. There was a lot of change management work. There was a lot of cultural differences between those companies. The organizational behavior course I did in commerce ended up becoming one of the most important courses I'd ever done, trying to understand corporate cultures and how to accommodate these people within a large company like IBM and so on. I'm going to speed things up a little bit here now so we have time for questions. I did that job for 4 years. And in 2012, I took another leadership opportunity with IBM. And we had an international program called the Corporate Service Corps. And I got together with these 11 people we were assigned, is what I mean. And it's called the India 16 team because it was the 16th team that we had sent. We were sending people all over the world to get global experience. It was the 16th team we had sent to India. And so I went to a southern state in India called Kerala, the city of Kochi, with all this group. And we split and we ran 4 different projects. They were pro bono projects for not-for-profits. I worked with the local economic development society on a marketing project, which was right up my alley, because you'll remember I said my second degree was in marketing. And again, it was a life-changing opportunity for me. It was one of the best things I ever did. I'm still in touch with all of these people today. I've visited 4 of them in 3 different countries since with my family. In 2012, not long after I came back from India, a new opportunity came along. Again, staying with the marketing theme. In 2011 and 12, IBM bought more than 4 actually. I'm showing the 4 largest ones here. 4 companies that were very focused on marketing automation. So the bringing technology into the marketing business in a very large degree. And given my background in both IT and marketing, again, I campaigned for and I was offered this particular job. I see a hand is raised. Jennifer, I'll let you, anyone who wants to interrupt, if you want to ask questions right now, go right ahead.
Oh, I was like, how did you see that? I didn't see that. If you want to write a question in the question comment section, I'm trying to figure out how I can find the person who raised hands.
I saw popped up, said Bill Cunningham raised his hand.
Got it. And Bill raised his hand. I don't know if it's a question or if it's like I got you. But Bill, if you can throw a comment or a question in the chat or the Q&A section, that would be great.
It might have been I got you because Bill was in commerce with me at the time when I was there. So it might be a salute. I'll continue. Bill can Bill can type his question if he has one, and you can pass it on. So I did a lot of work. It was a fascinating role for me because I was visiting chief marketing officers at companies across the country. So I was finally, this was 25 years after I had finished my marketing degree. Two things. First of all, I finally got to go talk to CMOs. And secondly, it became common for me to meet people who had done IT and marketing. I thought I was the only person in the country until then, but it's actually quite common these days. So that's that. In 2015, again, see how good your history is. Watson played Jeopardy in 2011. It took us 2.5 years to really get the business up and running. But in late 2013, my boss in the commerce job was asked to figure out what we should do about the Watson business in Canada. And he went away for a 2 weeks vacation and asked me to figure it out. And when he came back, I told him I had figured it out, and what they should do is assign it to me. And so he did. Sometimes you have to be bold enough to ask. For a year, it was the best job I'd ever had. We weren't actually selling much of Watson at the time. It was an evangelical role. I was crisscrossing the country and parts of the Caribbean, speaking to clients in every single industry about artificial intelligence, which was new to most of them at the time, and explaining how AI and machine learning was going to be such a huge thing in the coming years and how they needed to start preparing for it. I had a fantastic time at the job. And in 2015, they asked me to take over a sales team that was going to do it. And I made another unusual decision. I said I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay in front of customers. I wanted to spend all my time in front of customers, and I actually wanted to work on AI projects rather than outselling it. So I took another change. I probably gave up some money by doing that, but I didn't care. So in 2015, 16, 17, I worked exclusively in the healthcare industry. What I've thrown up here is a list, is 4 great examples of things that we did with AI in healthcare in those few years I was involved in. There are, things like drug discovery, things like using machine learning to look at functional MRI images and predict schizophrenia and later PTSD, working with the Canadian Institute for Military and Veterans Health Research to do a lot of things with natural language processing and with machine learning in universities across the country to help military and veterans and their families, and things like cardiovascular research. That team, for reasons that aren't important to this discussion, wound down in 2018, but I moved into the role I'm in now, which is a very, very similar role. It's just not healthcare specific. I do have healthcare clients that I work with, but it's not healthcare specific. So these days I spend most of my time on university research projects at Dalhousie, at Memorial, and elsewhere. Quantum is a new one at Sherbrooke, which I'm marginally engaged with, but may end up doing some more. Again, I'm going to have to speed up a little here now. That's my career. I talked to you about some of the soft skills. I hinted at some of them. I spoke to some in a little bit greater detail, but I now want to I want to talk to these 3 things and make sure I spend a little bit of time on them. In my opinion, for those of you who are looking to get a job with IBM, and I would argue almost any IT company, soft skills are just as, if not more important than your IT capabilities. When I hire, and I'm not hiring these days, but I've hired a lot of people in IBM, when I interview, everybody seems to have a reasonable capacity to provide the IT skills that we're looking for if they're coming at the same program. If you're at Dell or Waterloo or NSCC I understand the programs that you're taking. I'm assuming, unless you can tell me something amazing that you did when you were there, that your skills are similar to most of the other people who've made it past the screening phase and that we're interviewing. It's the soft skills that make the difference in the interview. And so I'll skip this. It's not important. Let me jump to what I would tell you I think are some of the most important soft skills. Communications, I touched on that with my story about Keith at Newfoundland Telephone. You have to listen more than you talk. And I can't tell you how important this is. You've got to vary your style and your vocabulary to suit the circumstances. I've been successful because I'm able to explain IT to business people. It's also true, by the way, that I can explain business to IT people. And people who can do that, I'm told time after time after time, are rare. They shouldn't be. You can do it. You just need to turn your mind to it. I'm not going to hit all 6 here. I'm going to jump through a few. Leadership skills, I would tell you, are things that you can learn on the job. But I would encourage those of you who are looking for your first job to try and find a way to play a leadership role in projects at school, in sports, in extracurricular activities. All of those are important in a job interview. My co-worker, Andrea, explained that on a similar session last week. Some of you may have seen it. Team working skills. This is true in almost every program at school these days, so I probably don't need to emphasize this. You must be able to work effectively with other people. There are no jobs here at IBM for loners. Unfortunately, if you're a loner, I'd encourage you to try and work on your team working skills. And for me, positive thinking is a huge one. I really find it depressing to work with people who have a bad attitude all the time. But I guess most of you do as well. I'll move on. What I can tell you, if you want to work on your professional skills, there are just as many. Here's an example from this is a free site, skillsbuild.org, the IBM Skills Build for Job Seekers site. And there are lots of other free sites. There are just as many courses available to help you work on your professional skills as there are for you to work on your IT skills. Go look for them. If you can't find them, ask someone. Write me if you have to. It's not that hard to find programs that will really help you with your soft skills. We've talked about luck being at the intersection of preparation and opportunity. This is a really weird chart. I'm almost embarrassed to show it, but it's a chart that I used to use all the time when I was trying to figure out whether to change jobs. I would sit down and I would try and tell myself, for each of these job factors or environmental factors, where's my head these days? Do I want to travel a little bit or a lot? Do I want to relocate? That was always at low, never. I swore years ago I'm never leaving Halifax. What kind of work-life balance do I want? You need to be able to, you need to explain these to your current boss if you're trying to change roles within the company where you work, or you should be able to understand these so to help you understand what kind of job to work for and to ask questions in the interview to see if it actually fits you. Because why take a job that you're not going to like? Again, there's all kinds of capabilities. There's all kinds of ways to find help with career planning. And on the same site, on a lot of the other sites, I looked beyond IBM and I looked at others. They're all there. That's a great thing about the internet. Everything's available these days. Finally, sorry, not finally. One of the things I did, you might say, well, they're almost 36 years. Why are you still bothering to do this? I'm still bothering to do it because that's who I am. That's what I do all the time. I needed some cybersecurity background. I see it as a huge, huge, huge requirement these days for anyone in IT. You have to understand cyber. IBM still runs the corporate service core, but we do it virtually now. I talked myself into a service core project in Poughkeepsie, New York in October or November. And it was a half-time. I worked half-time for 2 months on a cybersecurity project. starting with no knowledge, almost no knowledge of cybersecurity. But not surprisingly, my role on the team was to explain everything to the principals and the people running the school board. And because the cybersecurity folks on the team found they weren't comfortable doing that, or they weren't able to get their message across. But I learned an amazing amount about cybersecurity. Maybe that's what I'll do next. I don't know. But I'm prepared. I'm ready if the opportunity comes along. Finally, learning. Do not, if you have to, these days, you cannot get by. Technology is just changing so quickly. You have to keep learning. You need to be ahead of things. You can't ever lose that. In IBM, we're all encouraged to spend at least 40 hours a year on it. On the chart here, I usually come in the super learner category. I've certainly been bronze at least once, but you've got to spend on your own time and a little bit on a company time if they allow you. You've got to spend the time to keep your skills current or even ahead of current. Now, some predictions. I said I would give you my thoughts on where technology is going in the next couple of years. On bottom, you'll see this comes from quite a few different trend documents. People always put these out in January. I've read the ones you see on the bottom, and I've kind of summarized for you. Picked the ones that occur most frequently, and the ones which I think, from my experience with the Canadian market, are likely to be in demand soon, with the possible exception of the last one on the chart. So pandemic-driven digital process automation. Everybody is now understanding you have got to provide a way for customers to deal with you on the web. That's true in healthcare, where you could, I bet you before this year, there would be very few, if any, people on the phone who've ever had a virtual appointment with a doctor. That's true in almost every industry now. So I see two opportunities here. There's one for people who are going to code and build digital process automation. And there's one here for people with a design talent. Customer experience people are really hard to find. People who can build you can automate a process, but making it one that people want to use is a whole lot harder. And that's where the design people come in. That's an expense. That's a great job to earn money. If you can be a good CX person, you're going to do quite well. Cyber I already spoke to. Edge computing, Jen knows, in all of the customers or the partners and firms that DeepSense comes across, working with sensors, what I term edge, what many would term edge computing, moving computing out to the edge in the sensor and having some of the AI machine learning actually take place there. That's a big deal these days. So people with a particular networking and connectivity background are very valuable in that space. Blockchain, been around for a while. I'm sure you all know of it. What's going to happen this year and what you're seeing in all the trend reports is blockchain is going to be accepted by more and more and more of the larger enterprises. That's a job opportunity for some, but it reinforces the entrepreneurial opportunity for those of you who still want to go down that path. Big data, not getting smaller, getting bigger, staying and becoming even more important. So the growth of AI and machine learning is accelerating. Data scientists are still going to be in heavy demand for some time. That's not a new skill as such. I'm reinforcing for those of you who are in that field, you're in a good field. And finally, quantum. Quantum is going to break through in the next 2 years. So you saw me mention Sherbrooke University of Sherbrooke. Most universities across the country now are doing some things with quantum. Some of them are ahead. I saw somebody from Waterloo's on the call. Certainly Waterloo's way ahead. There will be a high demand for what I called here information scientists, but also for people who can program quantum computers. It's a little early, but that's a big one coming. There are all kinds of courses available for all of these things. I've taken the quantum fundamentals course myself, cyber, all of these things. You can find, you all know this, I presume. You can find badges and micro-credentials for all of these things out there, and you should be out pursuing them. Here's a simple one to give you a background on all of these things. On the Skills Build site, you'll find the Emerging Tech badge that covers most of the things I just spoke to. So these are the things that I suggest you take away from today's call. I think I spoke to them in enough detail. We should have almost 14 minutes left for questions, and I'm happy to field as many questions as you can ask in that period of time. Jen, I'll turn it over to you to moderate, if you will. I think you're on mute.
Gosh, I'm muted. Yes, jeepers, of course I was. Thanks very much, Rick. That was great. And I learned a lot. I think it's one of those things when you get a chance to work with people over a course of years, you get a chance to hear a little about their experience and what they've done, but I didn't know the scope and breadth of all of the things that you've talked about. I'm one of those weird people that has that background of business and technology. And it is true that a lot of times when you're working with people in various roles, they tend to really focus on the skills they were trained academically or enjoy the most. And so if somebody's really comfortable with programming, thinking at a more strategic level might be higher, or something that's not as natural. And it's harder to do. One of the things I'm curious about, though, you talk about being part of what's the next stage, what's the next type of technology. Is there anything people should keep in mind of what to not pursue? So is there a certain, somebody can look at Python or R as a programming language, or they can look at, you raise the point of blockchain or quantum. How do you know at what point there's something that you should pursue as an area of interest that might mean a new career opportunity, or is it something that isn't really worth your time?
Well, I think first of all, there's two ways to do that that come to mind. One is following the right sources yourself on a regular basis, in other words, reading. But the other is reaching out to people you know in the industry who've been at it a while and see what they think, right? Something that jumps to mind here, I would tell you, people who are for example, people who are into programming these days, full stack developers are in great demand. So understanding the front end and the back end is important. Coming out with, I'm disappointed now I didn't put it in the document, in the chart. I saw in one of the trend documents, I saw 3 categories and it showed a bunch of different IT skills and put them in the kind of routine, not going to make as much money this year, important ones that are doing well, and the ones that are going to be big. If I could find it, anyone else can find it. I can't even remember how I found it. It wasn't that hard. I said, what are the in-demand IT skills in the next few years? It was my search, something like that. But, when someone comes up and in an interview and on their resume, it says, they've got Java, they've got R, so does everybody. It's not that big a deal. Show me something. There's got to be at least something there that shows that you're paying attention and that you're looking at the newer things.
So
I'm going to quick answer one question. I did see Bill's question.
Oh, okay, you go. I was going to answer the next one. Okay, go.
The answer is there are about 850 people working at IBM's Client Innovation Center in Bedford right now. And we announced 6 or 7 weeks ago, we're adding 350 people in the next couple of years. So we'll be at 1,200 by 2024.
And that's at the Bedford IBM office.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so there's another question here. How do you demonstrate that someone has the soft skills necessary during an interview?
I find it's going to be a different answer for somebody who's looking for their first job than it would be, I think, for somebody who's what I would call a professional hire, coming to IBM from having worked in IT elsewhere. So son and daughter are now at that point. She's in first year at Dell, he's in grade 12. So they're starting to wonder about these things. And I say, look, you have got to think about how you can portray the skills that you have as soft skills where it's appropriate. So they both happen to be working at grocery stores right now. Not, no one be surprised by that, 17 and 18-year-olds. It's customer service. You're in a customer service role. That's a big deal. You're dealing with clients constantly, and you're having to put on your game face and be nice to them, ask them how they're doing, have a conversation with them. That's a soft skill, right? For people who play a sport, you're a team player, assuming it's a team sport, of course. If you're the captain or the assistant captain, that's a big deal. In the resume, that needs to be a big deal. You put that front and center. It's not something to have at the back and say, oh yeah, and also, by the way, I like sports. If you haven't had an opportunity to actually have people working for you, that is a soft skill. I don't mean not having people working for you. I mean leading a team. Being in debate. Clearly, you're someone who's is not going to have any kind of problem communicating and convincing people how to do things. It should be easier for people coming from a different IT company into IBM, let's say, as an example, to talk about team projects that you've worked on and what your role was on the team, how you supported a team, to talk about some of the other soft skills that I spoke to. Right. In the interview, the one about communications, that's what the whole interview is about. You're communicating with the interviewer. If you're having trouble communicating, and I would ask, if I'm the interviewer, I'm going to ask you some questions that are helping me probe the soft skills. And if you can't explain things to me in a way that anyone would understand, and you keep going to the most technical wording and so on to try and explain things, I'm going to challenge you on that and ask you to explain it as if I didn't have an IT background. You can prep for those kinds of things, and you can prepare for them. Those are the answers that come to mind right now.
That's great. I completely agree. I think sometimes, it's up to people to decide too when they're being interviewed. Are they being interviewed by someone who wants to hear the technical definition because they're actually challenging to see what you know? Or are they challenging to see that you can articulate it? Like you talked about your experience with that person who said, take it down a level, or take it to that level where everyone can understand. There's one more question too, not to just make sure we cover it off, but how important is information and data governance? And oh my goodness, this is the best question ever. It's like I planted it, but how important is that?
How important is information and data governance?
Yeah,
it's very important. I guess the question is in what context. I'm not sure it's all that important to somebody who's in college or university right now and looking for their first job. I'm not sure. I really am not sure. I'd defer to somebody who's, that's their field. I would expect that would be a great addition, but you may not get a lot of opportunity to use it in your first hire. But again, I'm not a data expert, so
that's fair.
Why don't you take a crack at it? You're much closer to that space than I am.
I think, yeah, I think that's a great, I think it's critical because no matter where a company sits, if they want to advance their data capabilities or use data to use computing on the edge, if they want to use it for AI, machine learning, you need to have solid, robust data management practices. And if you don't know when the data was collected, how it was collected, if it was collected consistently, you're not going to be able to build any kind of usable output in the future. So I think it's critical. It could be really boring, but it could be an interesting career opportunity for someone who likes process and documentation and doesn't want to write on the command line. One other question, are there specific quantum programming languages you can recommend?
So, Joe, you stumped me. I'm afraid I can't, but I'll promise you this. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. send me that question on LinkedIn, and I will talk to the guys I'm working with at Sherbrooke and ask their opinion and give you an answer.
Thank you. Will do. Excellent. I'm looking to see if there are any other questions, but I don't see any right now. I think, Rick, it doesn't look like you've covered off lots. Thank you so much. I think everything you've said today is great. And I hope that students kind of revisit some of those lessons learned, the piece around take opportunities when they come, ask for it, be brave. Don't wait for someone to hand something to you, and kind of take those challenges and stay ahead of the curve on things, because that's how you get a chance to move your role and carry on. And I think that that's a great lesson for students as they graduate and other people who want to grow. Is that your cottage behind you?
Bill, in Newfoundland, we call them cabins. I can't believe you must have been in Nova Scotia a long time now. No, that's not that's not mine. It's my friend's. He used to be the king of Austria. That's in Vienna. I want to go back to something just came to me back on the soft skills thing in the interview.
Yeah.
Even if I was in a technical interview and they were asking me a lot of technical questions, I would ask them, you're always asked in an interview, do you have any questions? I would say, yes, I think I have some very good soft skills. Are they important in this job? I would throw that as a question.
Can I also add, never not have a question. If someone's in an interview and I say, do you have any questions? And they say, no, I'm good.
I've never hired anyone who didn't have a question.
Same here.
Ever.
Yep. Have one or two armed and ready to go in case one doesn't come up during the interview. There's your countless advice, and write a cover letter.
And your question should be, at least one of the questions that you have ready should be one that's sort of like it's a sneak attack, if you will. Like I just said, it should be one that's designed to give you an opportunity to make yourself look good.
Yeah.
It's okay to just ask a question because you don't know the answer to it, but it's also okay to think of a question that you could ask that would make you look better to the interviewer.
Another one is how would you decide that I was successful in the first 6 months if I took this role? Like things like that, make them think and come back to you. That fuels more discussion. Absolutely. I agree. Okay. We could have a whole maybe that's what our next chat should be around, these things, like chatting about what you should think about doing and how. We already had one so for those of you who weren't able to join us last week, we were joined by Rick's colleague, Andrea, who did a fantastic job as well, covering off resumes and interviews and all sorts of sage advice that is timeless. Remember to go back to it as you reapply for new roles and look for new things. You have to remember how to approach the world. But thank you very much, Rick, for your time. We really appreciate it. And the link for Andrea's sessions there right now in our chat as well. But be sure to join us for our next chats. We like to cover off ocean data, AI and machine learning, data practices, but also real life practical discussions that can help you grow your tech skills. So thank you for joining us. And thank you very much, Rick.
And what you didn't say that I would reiterate is Andrea is actually the one who hires.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever she said is more important than what I say.
That too. Well, thank you very much. Have a great day, all.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for asking me, Jen.
Bye.
Bye.